Welcome to Kingdom Mothers Rise Up, where I encourage and equip you to heal your heart and renew your mind so you can live the fully abundant life Jesus promised you. Let's go. It's time to move.
Well, welcome to this interview episode of the Kingdom Mothers Rise Up podcast. I'm excited to have Kim Maclin as my guest today. She is a certified professional life coach. She's been a military wife for over 21 years. She's a classroom teacher turned homeschooling mama for 12 years to her 3 kids, 17, 14, and 8. She has a passion for helping moms to simplify their motherhood, create rhythms and routines that work for their unique families, and transform the relationships within themselves and their homes so that they can truly enjoy motherhood, no matter what season they're in, and stop wishing away this season for the next, only to realize they wished away their kids' childhood. That's so awesome, Kim. Welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I kind of just dive right into things. So I'm just going to start with why this podcast? Why did Kingdom Mothers Rise Up resonate with you? And you raised your hand to say, yes, I want to be on there.
I love it. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that. And I love our relationship. And I've worked with you in the past and know your heart around healing from childhood emotional neglect, so that we as parents can then step in and, break generational curses, but also help our kids not have as much trauma as they grow. And so to be a part of that and to help you spread your mission. And I just love the rise up. Like, motherhood is a calling. It is 100% our most important mission field. And it all starts in the home. And then when I think of rising up, I think of us all coming together and rising up. Like a rising tide lifts all boats is what I think of. And when we all come together and we have that support, then we're able to be the better versions of ourselves that we were created to be. And then also that rising up to the calling. And that means that we have to, we can't stay where we are. We have to grow and we have to change and we have to develop and we have to lean into what the Lord has for us next and step into that so that we can go the way that the Lord has us raising our children.
Absolutely. And if you look back at your life, when is a time that stands out to you that the Lord said, it's time to rise up?
Oh, dear. I would have to say it was when I was shoved into being a homeschooling mom, actually. So I actually was a classroom teacher in my master's degree in elementary education with specializations in health and psychology. And I stopped teaching in the classroom when we knew we wanted to start having kiddos. And so fast forward a year later, and we had our first daughter. She is now 18 and getting ready to head to college next week at the time of this recording. No, this week at the time of this recording. And so, we're navigating this whole new thing. And my husband was in the Air Force. He just retired, and we received unaccompanied orders to Korea, which means that we were welcome to be there, but we weren't really invited. And we had everything was space available. And so schools were space available. Medical was space available. We were pretty healthy, so the medical part didn't bother me too much. And I'm like, what's the worst thing that could happen? I have to homeschool my kid. I was a 1st and 2nd grade teacher. She is in 1st and 2nd grade. She was in kindergarten at the time, but when we would be there. And I think God was laughing at that moment because I had always kind of scoffed homeschoolers as a public school teacher for a number of reasons. I believe that it's our job as Christians to not to just hide in a hole, but to go out and live a life that is different and joyful and abundant, and we're set apart. And what I was seeing from many families 20 years ago was that they were really sheltering their kids in an unhealthy way, most homeschoolers at that time. And then the other reason was that they just were socially they weren't getting along well with others or whatever. And the answer was, well, if I can't get them to do this at school, I'll just homeschool them. And I thought that that was, kind of doing a disservice to your kids to not equip them or figure out how to help them in those situations. So I scoffed that, and then God made me a homeschooler. And that year was, it was very trying and very shaping and very revealing in many ways that weren't necessarily the most flattering, if I'm to be honest. And so like my control tendencies, I literally tried to create my classroom in my kitchen. We did the Pledge of Allegiance. We had circle time. It's quite embarrassing. And really what happened is I had that child started reading at a third grade level, entering kindergarten. And so she had a very natural bend to studying and learning. And she was very self-motivated. And we would go to the library and she'd pick up all this nonfiction stuff. But we were using this phenomenal curriculum that was so heavy in literature that it took a lot of time, and I couldn't check all the boxes and allow her to learn the way that I knew that kids learned best. And it was creating a relationship struggle. My 3-year-old was a dumper, and he was dumping all the toys in the playroom, and everything was destroyed. And things were just a battle between my oldest and myself as I'm trying to make her do the work. And I finally had to just throw my hands up and say, like, Lord, you are about relationship. You are not giving me a way out. She was number 1 on the wait list for 2 years. He would not give me a way out. And I knew at that point that I had to reevaluate everything and really dig in, like, okay, what are you trying to teach me here? What do you want here? And that's when we started kind of exploring unschooling. And again, I scoffed unschoolers. I was like, that's lazy. Those parents don't do anything. They let their kids have free reign. Little did I know. And so along the years, we've kind of like come into our own like eclectic, relaxed unschooling homeschool. And it's served us so well, especially I can now say that with confidence, having graduated my first and having my son is 15 now, and, sophomore in high school. And so just to be able to see them thrive because I got out of my own way and listened to what the Lord wanted me to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I homeschooled my first 3 all the way through, and I would have so many moms be like, oh, I could never homeschool because I don't get along with this kid or whatever. And I'm like, that is exactly why God has me homeschooling.
Yes. Like really, you can do it. Like, and I just want to encourage you listeners, like if you feel like a call to homeschool your kids is there and you just don't feel like you can do it, just lean into it, because really, truly, we can't do anything in our own strength anyway. But if you just lean into it and allow God to help you and to surround you with people who can really mentor you and be a resource for you, God created us to be in community. And, when we are able to surround ourselves with people, those people help us too.
We'll be right back.
Art Doodling with Jesus is a membership where I do a live workshop once a month where we explore an emotion or an idea through doodling, which is just a simple creative process. I encourage you to draw with permanent markers and paint with watercolor paint to create space to listen to your emotions, the thoughts that are in your head, and what the Lord wants to say to you. It is not about creating art. It is not about being good at it. It's about practicing the pause to go, what am I really feeling? What do I really think? What do I really believe on this particular topic? And giving you tools that you can use for yourself and with your kids to continue to explore your emotions outside of the workshops. You can come back and do workshops again and again if you're in the membership, but you also can take the practice that I'm teaching you and do it on your own for what's going on in your life. If you're interested in joining me, there's a link in the description.
Yeah. And so being over there, were you able to find community? Like, that was a long time ago when we couldn't connect over the internet and find people no matter where they were in the world. So how did you intentionally build that community for yourself?
Yeah, so I was really lucky. I was in the right place at the right time, really. And there were enough homeschoolers there. There was a small homeschooling group, mostly with younger kids, but there were some older kids there too. And they had been seasoned homeschoolers. And that's why I say, like, you think you can't do it, but God always puts people in your path. And so I can specifically think of two families that had kids just a little bit older than my kids, which is actually super fun because both of her kids are actually, her first one just graduated and her second one is going to be a freshman where my daughter is going to school. And she just
awesome.
absolutely loved this older girl who just graduated. Unfortunately, their time doesn't overlap, but it was, I mean, I could see how they were doing it and I could ask questions. And when I started to feel fearful, like they would encourage me. And there's another family as well, like having older kids, like high schoolers at that family. And it was great to see that community. And it was like 2010. So we did have a Facebook group. I'm pretty sure we used Google Groups at that time. But yeah, there definitely weren't as many things. And then I would just say, hey, we're going to take a field trip to Everland, which was like a little amusement park type zoo thing. And, it's like, we're going to take this field trip or we're going to go to Seoul. I'll drive because I felt like more adventurous. Right. And so the people who maybe were afraid to drive wouldn't go, but I had a big vehicle and I said, let's go. And they would go. And it was really great. And we were able to experience different cultures and different ways of doing things. And it was great. It was absolutely wonderful. And God knew what he was doing.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful example of like you had a big vehicle and just like making room. Because so often I hear moms talking about being lonely and not having community. And like, I know it can be hard and it's risky and it's scary, but open up your life and make room.
Yes.
And you might
Yes.
find that support that you need, because if you're sitting home hiding on social media, like, how does anybody know? And then, yeah, just that power of opening up a space and inviting somebody else in. And, maybe you won't be best friends, maybe it won't be fabulous, but you'll learn. And eventually you'll find those people in that community that you need.
Yeah, it's very true. And as a military spouse, that's something that I had to do quite often. I mean, we moved every 2 years, 3 years at the most, but those assignments were few and far between. It was really every 2 years for our family. And every place we moved, God put people in my path to have close relationships with. And I had to trust that these other moms were going to love my kids the way they love their own. And that was a pretty big deal. Like, you have to be able to be vulnerable. You have to be able to release. And, in my husband's line of work, it is normal for them to work 14, 15-hour days. And then when they deploy for months at a time, or they're remote, which is for a year. Or they're just TDY, which is just a temporary duty where they go to training. They're gone for, 2 to 3 weeks. They're home for a week. They're gone for 2 to 3 more weeks. They're home for a week as they're spinning up for deployment. And if we're not relying on each other, then we're going to fail. Like, we're going to be stressed out. I can't tell you how many times I had people in my living room, all the kids outside or even playing in our house. And everybody just brings something. So ground beef, lettuce, tomatoes, cheese. And it's like, okay, everybody's just say what you're going to bring and then show up at my house. I don't care what you're wearing. I don't care, if your kids are still in their pajamas. It does not matter. Like, just show up and let's sit here and have dinner together. Is it going to be perfect? No. Is it a dinner party? No. Are we interrupted 1,000 times because we all have a bunch of little kids who are whiny because they miss their dads and they're probably getting a little too much screen time? Yes. But we're all kind of in the same boat. And if we allow ourselves to be real with each other and not pretend like we have it all together, but just to say, like, I'm really struggling and my laundry hasn't been done in 2 weeks, and, or I'm picking out underwear from our clean clothes laundry bin because I needed a nap today and I couldn't, do my laundry, and that's okay. It's a season, right? And just being real, right?
Yeah. And I think, again, that being real and that being willing to say, like, no, I know your kids might still be in your pajamas and I don't care. Or I know you might not know how to cook a whole meal and I don't care. And, like, those are those ways of making space. Be like, yes, I have a seat for you.
Yes.
And you don't need to look such and such or do these things to show up and take that seat. Like, there's a seat for you just because.
Yeah.
And
there's a paper plate and plastic spoons, even though I love the environment and I'm trying to reduce my footprint. I know that in this season, I don't have capacity to wash dishes after having people over. So it's just accepting where you are in that season and doing, and that's the thing. My brain's going too fast. But when we're able to say, this is my best for this day, your A game is your A game. Like, that's you're showing up as the best that you can be. You're rocking it all. You're likely not operating at your A game all the time. Like, we all have our B, C days. Sometimes we even have our F days at the end of the day where we're like, wow, well, I really bombed that one. But these are the 3 things that I did really well today. And I showed up well for my family, and to celebrate those few things, because I guarantee you that there is something good in your day. And we tend to focus on the negative, right? Like, it takes one negative thing to just counteract like 20 really good things. And we are looking for that negativity bias, right? And so knowing that, when you wake up in the morning and you don't feel good, or you only got a couple of hours of sleep for whatever reason, because parenting and life happened, that you're not going to have the capacity. Your best on that day is not going to be the best when you got 9 hours of uninterrupted sleep and your husband brings you coffee in the morning and says, I'm going to tend to the kids so you can have an hour of quiet time with the Lord. Like, that is going to be your best on that day. And then your best on a different day is going to look very different, and just accepting that. But not as an excuse to not show up, just like, this is my capacity. Fill me, Lord. Help me to be where you need me to be. Like, where do I protect and guard my energy, and where do I put my energy in on this day? And how am I spending my time? And is it aligned with my priorities and my values, right?
Yeah. And in your working with women, how do you help them? Because what I find so often is women don't know themselves. So they don't know their capacity, or even if they think they know their capacity, they don't trust that they know their capacity, or that it's okay to say, today's going to be a C day and we're going to celebrate that. So how do you work with women and help them to get to know themselves well enough to trust that capacity?
Yeah, that you got to build in time for yourself. Like, the number one thing starts with self-care. And that is that self-knowledge. That's what you do with women, like getting to those emotional things, like those triggers, right? Where when you know yourself and you are aware of yourself, that only comes, it's like being aware of God, right? And knowing him. It only comes with spending time with him and reading his word. And the same thing, you have to spend time with yourself in those still moments and not numb. And when things get uncomfortable, like, sit in that discomfort instead of immediately going to pick up your phone and check Facebook or check Instagram, or, whatever it is that you do as your coping strategy to numb when things get uncomfortable. Just release that and dig into it and get curious about, okay, why Did I yell at my kid yesterday? Why did I lose my ever-loving mind? Okay. I can give you a personal example. My husband is still traveling a lot for work. He usually is gone about a week a month. And a few months ago, he was gone, and he was coming back that day or the next day. So it was at the end of his week or so away. And I realized like I was snapping more, and I was less patient and more irritable. And I got curious with that. I was like, what has changed? Like, why am I back in this space? And I realized that I was going to bed late, and I was going to bed with our youngest. She sleeps with us or she sleeps with me when my husband is gone. And I usually have a little sleepover with each of my kids when he's gone. So, and then I'm waking up, and I'm still waking up early, and I'm having my quiet time, but my schedule was off. I wasn't getting up and getting out and showering and exercising and just all those things that, even though my schedule kind of flows a little bit from day to day, not having my own space because she's sleeping in my room, it felt different. Like it wasn't recharging. And I felt like I was having to tiptoe. And then by the time that I'm greeting her, I feel like I've got all these other things that I need to do. And like, I just wasn't, even though I was having that quiet time and that coffee and, or tea or whatever I was drinking, probably coffee. I'm not drinking coffee right now. I was just telling McCove that I'm doing a coffee fast for 30 days with our church as we're praying for a transition within our church. And so my normal ritual, coffee is a ritual for me. And I love to spend time with the Lord in the morning, and it fills me up to be still and quiet with him. And I was getting that, but there wasn't that space in the rest of my day. And I had to get curious with that and like, why? And I realized this is why. And when you take that time to ask yourself the questions, whether it's, why am I more easily triggered? Why do I feel less patient? Why is the house a mess? Why aren't my normal rhythms and routines happening? Why does my relationship feel off with my kids, with my husband? And really getting curious about that. Why do I feel anxious inside when I scroll social media? Like whatever it happens to be, getting curious about that and sitting with that discomfort will reveal to you, the Lord will reveal to you. He is so good. He asks you, knock, seek. He will show you what it is that he has for you. We just have to sit with it. And once he reveals that to you, that you can then make those changes, and you will realize like, oh, how I'm spending my time is not aligned with my values. It's not aligned with how I want to be spending my time. Or I haven't read aloud to my child in a week, or I haven't played board games with my family in a month, like whatever it happens to be. And you're like, what is taking that space? And getting curious, not with judgment. Like, and that's, I know that you work with that too, is we can be our biggest critics, right? But just to ask ourselves these questions with that curiosity and not judgment, it's not good or bad. It just is. And knowing how it is means that we can go forward and change things.
Yeah. Because if we're not willing to admit where we are, we can't easily get anywhere else.
Right. And it's not weakness. Like the strongest mama is the mama that sits in silence in her discomfort to allow for healing so that she can be a better mama for her kids.
Yeah.
That's the strongest mama.
And it's strength to reach out and say, I need help.
Yes. And I will tell you, for years and years and years, I was the first person to offer help, and I would never ask for it. And it wasn't until right after our third baby and my husband's dad was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. Well, he had memory loss, and they were going to go in and they found this tumor. They were going to go do an emergency surgery. and our movers were coming and they were packing us out to move to Italy. And I asked him, I said, do you want to go? And he said, I can't. Like, you're here. We've got this new baby. The Packers are coming. And I looked at him and I said, if you want to be there, there are a number of women that all I had to do is post on our squadron Facebook page, who can come and help me, sit with me while the movers come, and they would be there. And he's like, are you sure? It's like, yes. And I did. I had women for 4 days of our pack out while he was in Florida and I was in Arizona for 4 days. They were on shifts where somebody was at my house, so I wasn't alone. And if I needed to nurse a baby, then I could go nurse a baby without having to worry about our stuff, growing legs or being able to check off the inventory boxes or whatever. And the crazy thing is that I sit there and I worry, I'm going to be such an inconvenience. Oh, I don't want to bother anybody. Like, why do we believe this message that we're a bother and an inconvenience, right? Those are childhood wounds that we need to be digging into and taking those thoughts captive and flipping them and aligning them to what the Lord says. The Lord does not say we are a burden. The Lord says we are a joy. And so taking those thoughts captive, not believing them, and every single part, like, people brought me meals. They took my big kids to practices. They held my baby. They changed diapers. Like, they did all of the things. And that's what community is made for. That's what we're made for.
Yeah. And I think so many women, like, they're the ones, like, they wouldn't give a second thought to going over and changing the diapers and cleaning the bathrooms and doing all those things. But the idea of asking for that help or allowing someone to do that help is just, like, repulsive. And it is from childhood emotional neglect. Like, you learned as a kid that having needs was burdensome and people didn't like it if you expressed what you needed and that you needed help with things. And so I think that's a huge barrier to community that women maybe don't recognize, of like, well, I want community. I'm willing to serve and I'm willing to help. And but are you willing to be helped? Are you willing to let somebody in? Because it has to go both ways or you're not going to have a healthy community.
It's so true. And I was that person that I'm like, yes, I'll do this for you. And yes, I'll do this. And that wore me thin in many, many, many ways. And then I had to learn to also say no, because I was raised to be a people pleaser and I didn't want to tell anybody no. And I had very loose boundaries around my time and my energy. And this is something that I work with my clients on because it is a common thing. Yeah. And, being able to protect our time, protect our energy, and really create those boundaries so that we can help others, but also not to the detriment of our families. Because every time we say yes to one thing, we have to say no to something else. And what I found, and I find with many women, is that we're so busy saying yes to everybody else that at the end of the day, our families are getting what's left of us, which is pretty much nothing.
Yeah. Which for any mom I know does not align with our values.
No.
But we've been taught it does, because if we're loving others, that means saying yes and doing what they want.
Yeah. And if you're running through, like, love your neighbor, serve your neighbor, blah, 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 like all of that. But really, if you dig into, well, what does the Bible really say? The Bible says, love God first, like seek God first. God has the first place, then your husband, then your children, and then all the other things, work, family, whatever. And it doesn't mean to be selfish. It just means, like, you've got the big rocks, right? It's like the rocks in the jar and you've got the big rocks. Well, God's your biggest rock. And if you fill up your jar with all the other rocks and then you're like, oh, well, where am I going to squeeze that in? You can't fit that rock in there, but because it's all filled up with, like, the little sand stuff. But if we were to, like the sand is like something that you might enjoy, like Netflix, or, even scrolling social media and connecting with friends over that. It's sand and it could be valuable, but it comes in on top of all the other big rocks, and then it fills the crevices and it adds joy and value to your day as something that's relaxing and leisurely and good versus something that is taking away from the greatness.
Yeah. Yeah, huge difference between sitting and scrolling with that nagging little, I should be doing this, I shouldn't be doing that, I should be doing dishes, I should be connecting with my daughter, I should be whatever, versus like, oh, I've taken care of everything I need to, and I can sit here and relax for a few minutes.
Yes, exactly. And I remember like my low point. It was like 2020 and the weight of the world and our social environment and the pandemic, all of that. And I was just allowing things that I didn't want to allow. I was tolerating things. And my kids were getting more screen time. I was getting more screen time. And I remember like just losing my ever living mind with them. And it's like, I'm so annoyed, or I don't even want to deal with this, or whatever it happens to be, and just checking out. That's what the social media is, right? Like so many times we're just checking out because it's easier to pick up our phones for a hit of dopamine than it is to walk over to our kids who are fighting and saying, I see that you're having a problem. You look really angry right now. Tell me about that. And not getting all stirred up into their big emotions, because really we get stirred up into their big emotions when our big emotions aren't cared for.
Yes. Yes. So true.
But when our big emotions are cared for, we're able to go to our kids and just be more peaceful as we see them dysregulated. We know how to regulate our own emotions, and then we're able to help them regulate theirs to the point where then now they're able to problem solve.
Yeah. And I think that's helping them cope with those big emotions, to sit with them, and because we can't be emotional and logical at the same time.
Exactly.
And so when we try to talk to our kids and try to get them to see that it's not a big deal, or that we can fix it, or that they just need to stop, or whatever we're trying to do, like it doesn't do anything but escalate it, because they can't hear that in their emotional state. So making that space, like you said, to like, I hear you, I see that it looks like you're really upset, can you tell me about that? And showing them how to make space for their emotions so that they can calm down, and then they can return to their logical brain and figure out what they could do about this.
Yes, yes. And the alternative, if we're not well cared for, what that ends up looking like is, give me that toy. You guys stop fighting. You're always fighting. Why can't you just be friends? Brothers are supposed to be the best friends. Go to your rooms. And then they go to their rooms, the doors slam. You're like, don't slam the door. How dare you disrespect me? And then you turn around, grab your phone, go to your bedroom and start scrolling because you feel really crappy right now. Your needs aren't getting met. Their needs aren't getting met. But I can get a quick dopamine hit right here, and I can numb and I can start to feel better, instead of getting curious with like, okay, I didn't handle that well. Why didn't I handle that well? And then being able to go back to those kids and say, you know what, I didn't handle that well. I am so sorry. This is what I should have done. Like, how can I help you? I saw that you were struggling and I was struggling too. Let's fix this. Let's have a do-over.
Yes, that's the very hard but extremely beautiful part of mothering.
Yes, it's so refining.
I made a mess, and that's not who I want to be, but we can fix it. And if you'll stick with me, like, we can fix it.
Yeah. And how beautiful, because that is the picture of the Lord's relationship with us, right? And that's what we want to be. We want to be the hands and feet of Jesus within our home, our biggest mission field. And that's where we're growing our closest disciples. And so when we're able to come and parent our kids the way that Jesus parents us, then we're able to show the love of Jesus that is not that like punitive, harsh, like ugly, mean side, but this loving, gentle, tender, but firm, clear in this is what our boundaries are. This is when you follow my will for your life, things will go so much more smoothly for you. And when you stray from that, then things are going to be more difficult. And then he says, he gives us clear direction in the Bible. Like, this is how you can make things go well for you. This is how you can be smooth. And when you do these things aren't going to be smooth. And he sometimes just allows us to do them. And then we have to fix our mess and we have to go to him and be humble and submit and repent. And really, that is the whole model. It's like this rip repair of our relationship with our kids and our relationship with the Lord.
Yeah. And it's what actually builds relationship.
Yes.
And builds trust, because I made a mistake. I made a mess. And we can come back to relationship instead of I made a mess, I made a mistake, and now there's this rift that we can't, that's pushing us apart.
Because we're too prideful
to come back together.
Yeah. And it does. It boils down to pride. It gets when we're too prideful to say, I made a mistake. And that's what I grew up with. Like my parents were great parents and they did the best that they could with the information and the resources that they had at their disposal. My dad, like I cannot remember him when I was growing up. He will now, but when I was growing up, ever admitting to being like, to making a mistake or being wrong. And there was that rift there.
Yeah. So being able to come back and apologize to your kids is so healing.
It really is. If
it's a genuine, like, I messed up and I'm sorry.
Yeah. And it teaches them how to apologize in an authentic way. And that's one of the big things that I notice about the way that we chose to parent. And I never forced apologies. That might not be true. I might have like, say you're sorry when they were like 2, and then I learned better. But well, my oldest. And so we didn't force apologies because they didn't come from the heart. And so a true, authentic apology doesn't come from somebody saying, say you're sorry, and then them saying sorry. And so like it comes from us modeling. Those behaviors are caught, they are not taught. And that I like to say that whole like do as I say, not as I do is dead. And it never worked anyway. And so because it is true, our kids learn from what we teach through our modeling. And that's one of the ways, like pulling in my education background, modeling is the number one way that kids are going to learn how to do something. Yeah. So they're always watching.
Yeah. And I just want to say to all the moms that are like, oh, great.
God fills in the gaps.
Not
it's
a condemnation, and it is not an opportunity to beat yourself up. It's an opportunity to say, okay, what kind of model do I want to be?
Absolutely.
And what skills do I need? What help do I need? What healing do I need? What knowledge do I need to be that model that I want to be? It's an invitation to come to the table. It's not just like, It's not condemnation or judgment or shame.
And I wouldn't be where I am without friends that modeled things and taught things to me. Like, and of course my background, my professional background, but also just watching moms raise their kids and like, watching kids' responses to their parents and like, okay, they're hearing that, but they're not internalizing it, or like they're quiet now, They're no longer doing that behavior, but they're fearful. There's fear in their eyes. And being able to, and that's why we do what we do, McCove, is like, we get to partner with these moms who don't have the tools yet to be able to show up as the versions of themselves that they want to be. And we get to teach them these tools, because when you work with us, then we give you the tools that we have cultivated in ourselves, our gifts that the Lord has given us, and the things that we've learned from other people that we've either invested in or have invested in us, right? And it takes a village. And that is why we are struggling so much as a whole, is that we have lost our village. We are isolated. We are trying to do this alone, and we never were meant to do it alone in the first place.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your conversation today. It has been fabulous.
Thank you. I always love chatting with you.
It's always good. Do you have a parting thought you want to leave with our moms today?
Be gentle with yourself and give yourself grace. I think just be gentle with yourself. The inside, there is a very young version of yourself who didn't get their needs met and who wasn't loved the way that they needed to be loved at the time, whether that was through words or actions or needs being met or whatever. And every time that you show up for your kids the way that you wish that others had shown up for you, you help to heal that young one inside of you. And I see that so much. My youngest daughter is my mini me. She looks so much like me. She's so full of big emotions. And when I allow her to feel her emotions and to sit with her for as long as she needs, and I just practice my emotional regulation while she is dysregulated, I heal those parts of me, and it's easier to show up every single time. And I think that that's the biggest thing, is that every time I show up from a place of grace and compassion and empathy, and I don't allow myself to get all worked up, I am healed. And the next time it's even easier. And as we have success, and just celebrate that small success. Did you not lose your ever-loving mind for 10 seconds before you had to leave the room and calm down? Absolutely wonderful. Way to go. That is so much progress. And then the next time, like, did I keep it together? I kept it together for 30 seconds before I had to leave that room. Like, I am rocking this thing. And just celebrating those small things. So be gentle with yourself. Give yourself grace. You're learning something new. And with that comes growing pains.
Yeah, that's beautiful. All right. Thank you so much. There will be links to Kim's resources and how to connect with her. And you had a free gift. Can you tell us about what that is? There'll be links in the show notes, but tell us about that.
So I actually I call it the Joyful Mamahood Guide, or the Joyful Mama Guide. I am also the hostess of the Joyful Mamahood Positive Parenting, Time Management, Marriage and Family podcast. And so that Joyful Mamahood is always on my tongue, but it is the Joyful Mama Guide. It is a guide to the top mistakes that moms are making that keep them overwhelmed and stressed out, and what you can do about it to live a more joyful, abundant life with just that grace and ease, so that when life throws you those curveballs, you're better able to handle them.
That's awesome. So there'll be the link for that in the description. And just want to remind you all that your healing heals generations. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Kingdom Mothers Rise Up podcast. I'm blessed to have you here. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can join us in the Kingdom Mothers Rise Up Facebook community. When you're ready for more support, I have the Heart Doodling with Jesus monthly membership, periodic group coaching, and one-on-one personalized coaching as well. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.